Well, so you talk about like Stephen King. You said, he's a sweet guy. I follow him, I see him online, and he's politically, active, and he's generous, and everyone, says the same thing. And you know, I know your favorite, the great one, Erica Worth, and what a great person, what a generous person, what a great writer. You
She's literally like sent from above. I
right?
don't, I'm not like a religious dude or anything, but like she is something else, man. Like she has been so helpful and
Hmm.
so guiding to me. And also, it's nice to actually meet somebody in the writing community that can party as hard as me.
Yeah.
So, like, that was pretty clutch. There's literally only like two. So
Oh
it's
shoot. Is
like,
that a
yeah,
challenge? Is
dude,
that a
like,
challenge or what?
dude, I'm in it to win it. Let's go. Come to StokerCon in Pittsburgh,
Right?
baby.
Ah, there it
Um,
is.
throwing down the gauntlet. But no, she's just incredible. And like the best to top it all off, not only is she like personable and like super sweet and fun and blah 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 blah, she's hysterical.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I could honestly listen to her talk for hours.
There you go, man. I had such a great time talking to her and reading, her stuff. So like how, these are yourself included, these are great horror writers, but you're nice people.
Yeah.
What's
And
what's that
I've
what's that all about?
I don't know, man. Like it's funny, like a lot of a lot of horror writers that I've met have like something in their childhood that like might have been a little screwed up or whatever.
Okay.
I had the most normal white bread suburban, like I played sports, I did theater, my parents weren't divorced, like I wasn't abused, there was nothing bad. My
Uh,
and like this is a big one too, like
uh,
in the writing circles or whatever, but like my church experience was not bad.
okay.
Like I'm not a
Yeah.
religious dude.
Uh,
I'm not Catholic either, which I know is weird as an Italian. Like, the church that I grew up going to was all about the community and like welcomed individuals of
mhm.
different, ethnicities, and like
Uh-huh.
there were LGBTQ
Sure.
representatives in our church, and like they were everybody got along, and it was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like it was literally what I guess church is supposed to be,
Uh-huh.
but it's not for other people. So like every time I see people like, oh, my church life was so terrible, it's blah blah blah.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, wow, that sounds awful. Everything you're describing sounds awful. It's not my experience, but I'm sorry
Yeah.
that that happened.
Yeah.
Like my family is still very close to our pastor and stuff, and he's a good dude.
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Like everybody in the writing community and the horror community specifically that I've met has been pretty chill. There's a
Hmm.
couple people that I don't really socialize much with, and it's like, for whatever reason, but it's like for the most part, everybody's super cool,
Yeah. I mean,
especially the big guys.
okay.
Like I have a blurb on the cover of the Vile Thing We Created from Paul Tremblay,
Oh yeah.
and like he's literally like one of the best in the world,
Hmm.
and like he took the time to read the book, to help me with the book, to blurb the book. He's been so supportive of me,
Hmm.
and he's a master of the genre, and he's a
Sure.
genius and a very good person. Like
Hmm.
he didn't have to take the time,
No.
but he does, and he still does. Like if I
Mhm.
email him, he gets back to me like right away. Like he's
Huh.
just a good person.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great
So
to hear.
like, when you meet somebody like that, it's easy to support and
Mhm.
celebrate them because they are an actual good person.
Mhm. Mm.
Um, I'm good friends with a guy named Todd Kiesling. He's literally like the future of horror. This guy's a genius. Such a sweet guy. People are good, and yeah, sure, we might have some screwed up stuff in our past or in our childhoods or whatever, but like I think kind of the prevailing thing in the horror community is like the rising tide floats all boats kind of thing.
Mhm.
So there's not really a spirit of competition,
Yeah.
which is nice. Like I know in MFA circles, there is that spirit of competition. Like everybody's kind of, the MFA programs and stuff have like a tendency to be very cutthroat,
Mm.
very backbiting and stuff like that. Mine was not. Um, but that's also because like we were all doing something different and really
Sure.
interesting in,
Yeah.
my particular group. Um, but yeah, like, the literary kind of community in terms of MFA people seems to be a little more throat cutty.
Hmm. Okay. So I mean, this the books. the book and the books you've written, I mean, there's some pretty horrific stuff. It's horror.
Yeah.
I mean, is it rough to be like in the muck, so to speak? I mean, you're writing about cults and the occult and you know, gruesome deaths and murders and, you know, darkness in all meanings of that word. Like, is it? I mean, is it like an experience to like you know, to write for an hour and a half or 3 hours, or that one day when you get six? Is it kind of like, whew, I need a cigar, I need to relax? And also, you know, kind of connecting it to, you wrote about writing as cathartic,
Hmm.
especially, you know, again, in reference to the passing of your father.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I appreciate you sharing that. And I, you know, if it's anything too personal, please don't feel like you need to.
Hmm.
But I just wonder about writing as cathartic, as horror writing as, I mean, do you feel like you're in the muck, so to speak, or is that maybe a good thing?
I think it's a good thing, but also like, you know, in writing about all this dark stuff, the worst thing, you know, in like the research specifically for like the vile thing we
Hmm.
created, the worst part and the most horrific part to me was how women of color are treated in our medical systems. How
Maternity specifically, right, is what the book,
100%,
right?
how much they have to advocate for themselves because nobody listens. And that was the most horrifying thing to me. Like I can write about the spooky, scary stuff all day
Okay.
because at the end of the day, none of that stuff is real.
Mm.
But a woman of color goes into a hospital, institutional racism might prevent her from getting the best possible care. And that is infinitely worse. And that made me really worried and really upset. That's the stuff that really upsets me, right? Like
Mm.
the real life kind of stuff. And I'm not saying like, oh, monsters aren't real, because like, who am I to say? You know, I believe in believing, right? Like I wrote a book
Mm.
about Bigfoot. My wife makes fun of me because I actually hope and pray to God or any deity out there that Bigfoot is real. Nothing would make me happier because the world is a boring place
Sure.
and we need dreams and we need stuff to like hope that they exist.
Hmm.
You know, I don't want monsters to be under children's beds. I don't want that to be the case, but it's fun to write about them.
Hmm.
And it's even more fun to write about kids getting one up on
Hmm.
those monsters, you
Hmm.
know? Um, and I think like, you know, specifically in terms of the catharsis aspect, if I didn't start writing after my dad died, I would have killed myself. And I've talked about this with my therapist a lot. I talk to my therapist every week. I love him. We had a fabulous session talking about AI and how worried I am about AI and stuff. It was like a whole
Hmm.
weird it was a weird thing, but I was, you know, I've told him this and therapy helped me, my wife helped me, but writing helped me also.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I remember there was a day, it was like 2 months after my dad passed away, and I had gotten a teaching job that I wanted so badly, and then it got taken off the table. And I was sitting in the parking lot and I was like, I got nothing left. I've got nothing left in the tank. I'm gonna drive off a bridge. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna end it. Like this is it. And I remember calling my insurance, getting therapy, you know, therapists' phone numbers, making like 4 phone calls, finally getting through to one, and they were like, "We can get you in on Friday
Hmm.
if you can just, you know, if you can last a couple days and really think everything through." Actually, it wasn't Friday because this happened on a Tuesday. They got me in on Thursday,
Hmm.
and I met my therapist. And I know it's a very rare occurrence to jive with your therapist right away, but he and I hit the ground running, and I love him.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so the writing helped. I wrote my first collection of short stories around the same time I started therapy. And he saw writing as a therapeutic exercise, and it has been. Um, Everything that I write is for my dad.
Hmm.
Everything I write is dedicated to him or
Hmm.
my niece and nephew. My YA stuff is for my niece and nephew as well as my dad.
Hmm.
But it's I just want to honor and share these things with him, even though he's not here. And the work and the catharsis behind like exercising these demons that I have is how I kind of deal with losing him, even though it's been 4 years, but it's still there. And like my therapist says, it doesn't get better, it gets different.
Mm.
And that evolution is still happening, of it getting different. And I'm feeling better about things. And I know how I hear his voice in my head all the time.
Mm.
And, you know, for better or for worse, like, you know, he's never nagging. It's not like ever a nagging thing. He's more of like, if I want to know what he would think, that's when I hear him. And so I'm thankful for that I could still hear him. But I feel him too in many ways. Like when I'm writing something and something scary comes in my mind, I'm like, oh, that would make my dad jump. And that would make me jump. And like it's just, and enjoying like the Halloween movies that we used to love and the comedy movies we used to love. At Seinfeld, he was a big Seinfeld guy. Getting to enjoy those things with him and like watching them now and hearing his laugh at all the same jokes that he would always laugh at. That's all part of it for me. So I try to kind of put those feelings into all my work. My second collection, Her Infernal Name, is all about me exercising fears. And I put a lot of my own fears into that. And a lot of those centered around my dad too, because I have a story in there called The Final Goodbye about my fear of not having any kind of real closure when my dad passed away. Because he passed away. I was at a concert and I got home and he passed in the middle of the night. And I didn't see him one last time.
Yeah.
So that story is all about my desperation and desire to see him one last time. But I guess in many ways, like I've had closure since then because, like I said, he is always kind of like in my head kind of thing. And you know, we did talk the day before he passed away. So you know, there was that too. But you know, you always have these like nagging things, right? And you need to get them out. Like you can only talk so much to your spouse or your partner or whatever, or your friends. I don't like talking too much about it with my wife because I know she's got a lot going on. I almost never talk about it with my friends because like they don't have the deep well of empathy. Like I have two friends who have very deep wells of empathy and they have understanding of this kind of thing. But my two of my closest friends who I see more often, they do not. And that's not like a slight against them. That's just they're not equipped. So I don't really bother them. So I talk about it with my shrink. I don't bother my mom with it because I don't want her to get upset. Which she doesn't really. Like she's coped with it in different ways. But yeah, so I think, you know, the catharsis in the writing definitely comes from that kind of well of having lost him. And you know, there was all for all intents and purposes, like we thought he was gonna pull through. Like we were preparing for him to pull through, and then he didn't. And so that kind of left me feeling like scattered, like very mentally and emotionally scattered, which is why 2 months later, when I got and then lost the job, why I was so ready to end it all. And obviously, I'm glad I didn't because I got married since then, and my wife is awesome. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And like, you know, I've gotten to write some cool stuff, and I've made some new writing friends and whatever. I'm having a good time. But it's always there, like in the back of my head, that like heartbreak. And I try to put some of that into my work. And I'm in this like weird phase where I want to like transmute that into like a kind of like that kind of like childlike awe that you get in like a Spielbergy kind of movie. So I'm working on a middle grade book right now, and I love writing these kids. And I kind of give them that kind of like that like tickle feeling you get in your chest when something like is exciting, like when we were kids, you know? And that's kind of what I'm like transmuting my grief and catharsis into that. And it's fun. It's fun changing it too, you know? And you can only learn that through like therapy and like real introspection and stuff. Because a lot of people just get angry, you know, with grief. They get frustrated with grief. And like, that's the last thing I wanted to do. Like, I feel like I've become a more centered person because of therapy and all of that. That was a long ass answer. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm in awe. I really thank you so much. I appreciate you being so open and honest. I I I don't know what to say other than thank you very much for sharing that. That makes a lot of sense. The catharsis part of it, writing is therapeutic, and I just thank you so much. I think it hits home with a lot of us what you're saying.
Yeah, and like therapy is a good thing.
Oh, for
If
sure.
if people are able to do it, if you have the means, your insurance will cover it, whatever.
Hmm.
There are free options, I'm sure, in your area if you can find them. It's very worth it. It's worth talking to somebody outside of your sphere to get an outsider's opinion on things.
125% agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, so like, so the vile thing we created is a heck of a book. It's
Thank you.
if you're looking for just a page turner, definitely. If you're looking at it for psychological thriller, going back to what you're talking about with like the statistics of like African American women, Black women, and maternity and such, and you were talking about like I don't want to put words in your mouth. It's almost well, I think of like when Jordan Peele was talking about Get Out, and he's
Yeah.
like, that's I've seen like 4 horror movies in my life because I'm such a scaredy cat. That's a right, but I mean that's a different kind. That's a psychological.
Yeah.
I mean that scene where the main character is getting grilled and he's doing the smoke, trying to stop smoking and all. I mean like that is scary.
Oh yeah.
That is scary in a different way because I mean Jordan Peele, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically was like, what's scarier than racism,
Yep.
right? And so, I get the point you're making about, oh, monsters and all that, like that's cool, but that's not real. I know that's not real, but
Yeah.
the things like the psychological, the gaslighting that goes on in the book and all those type of things, that's scary, right?
Yeah, and finding ways to talk about that stuff,
Hmm.
that's the fun part. Like that's where we can get really like
Yeah.
creative and spooky with it, right? Like, you know, talking about like the vile thing we created is so very much about my fear of possibly ever being a parent. I'm not ever going to be a parent. We are child free, but it's when we started dating and like before we got married, we talked a lot about like, oh, do we want to have kids? Do we want to do
Hmm.
that? Whatever. And we had a lot of those like frank discussions about like money and where are we going to live and blah 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 blah. And it's just not doable. Like Long Island's expensive, upstate New York is expensive. Like we want to buy upstate eventually, and it's like it's just not really doable on what I make and what she makes. And also like, you know, I don't want to do something that I don't think I would be really good at.
Hmm.
And I'm all for like challenging myself. And maybe I would be a good dad, but maybe I would be a terrible dad.
Hmm.
Like I don't. I had a great dad. I have a great mom, and like my wife has an incredible mom, and she has a good dad. Like I couldn't be that. I don't know that I could be that. So like, the last thing I wanted people to think was like, oh well, Robert's an antinatalist. He hates kids. Blah 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 blah. Totally not true. Because if I did, why would I be a teacher? Number one, and number
Sure.
two, like I find kids fun,
Hmm.
but it's fun like having fun with them and then not having to like change a diaper.
You
Like,
get to go home. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like I've never changed a diaper. I've never done that. I don't know how good at that I'd be because like I don't know. I'm like kind of a clean freak.
Okay.
And just like that would freak me out. That whole thing. I remember I was dating a girl. We went to one of her friends' houses for a party. We walked in and the house, they had just had a baby and the house stunk like diaper. And I picked up on it immediately, but nobody else seemed to. And I remember saying to my then girlfriend, I was like, I gotta go outside. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna throw up. Like this is brutal. And I feel bad thinking about that now because it's like they couldn't help it because it's a
Sure.
baby,
Sure.
but like it's just not for me, man. Like I can't do it. But like I don't, the thing really too, like pregnancy is body horror.
Mm.
And I had written some body horror in the past, and I've seen a lot of body horror movies and stuff, but like body horror in terms of pregnancy is literally something that women go through all the time. And I started the vile thing we created having like, having the utmost respect for women in every fathomable way. And then I came out of it having even more, if that's
Right.
possible.
Right.
Because it's just like, especially like women of color who have children, just like unbelievable. I can't imagine the nonsense of dealing with a doctor who's gaslighting you or telling you one thing and it's another.
Mm.
It's just that scares the hell out of me. And like that's one thing I didn't want in the book. I didn't want the couple. I didn't want the husband to be gaslighting the wife because
Mm.
then it's like, it's basically just Rosemary's Baby then. But I didn't I wanted them to be in it together, but in it together through different experience.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where the alternating chapters came from, was telling
Gotcha.
both of their sides. Because in my mind, Lola's the hero and the lead character, and Ian is second banana.
Hmm.
But he does get his own starring role in different parts or
Oh,
whatever.
definitely.
But yeah, but yeah, that's kind of where that all the idea of approaching something, a real world issue,
Hmm.
through the lens of like spooky fiction is fun for me.
Yeah. And
My
so,
quote is always like my fallback is always like, yeah, a family drama is really cool and all, but a family drama with a ghost is even better.
heck yeah. You talked about that time walking into the smelly diaper. So early on in the book, so like I said, we have Lola and we have Ian,
Mm-hmm.
and they go to this children's birthday party, and it's just, it's madness.
Mm-hmm.
And Lola, they feel alone because they don't have kids. It's this cult of sorts, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a little bit later on in the book, but this is just a pretty hilarious line because I found it to be pretty accurate. Talking about Ian was talking about his teacher coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
Quote: Ian hated socializing with his coworkers, finding their lives uninteresting for the most part, as they all seem to be a variation on the same type of person: a parent, the lifelong teacher, or the craft beer enthusiast. Sometimes all three. I thought that was hilarious, right?
Thanks.
And so like Ian and Lola, like they seem like you know I mean, beautiful couple. Like they love each other so much. They let each other know. They show each other so much. Holy crap, they have an active sex life. Man, man. At least
One of my
before
favorite
the
one
kid, right?
one of my favorite things that I got from like one books to grammar was she was like, "Oh my god, this book is so spicy," but then it gets so like, so she used the emoji, so
Yeah.
she used like the chili emoji, and then
Uh-huh.
she used like the green face sick emoji. So I was like, "Yeah, cool,
There you
that
go.
works."
It's like Robert Ottone slash Jackie Collins over here, Jeez, man. But but yeah, just the idea of like, Ian is talking about, or like, I don't want to let a kid quote cramp my style, and the party's upsetting just because they feel shunned. I
Hmm.
basically, right, like okay, we've invited this one, but what about the other ones? They could tell that like this was kind of like their first, and the other group was, definitely had their relationships cemented, right? So
Hmm.
like I guess doing a little armchair psychology here,
Yeah.
they decide to have a kid, kind of not spur the moment, but like, they talk about, talk it through, but it's kind of like, in some ways, if you were to boil it down, like, why did you decide to have a kid? Well, because we wanted to be part of the group. So like,
Hmm.
going back a little bit, I guess, what's like the psychology behind them saying, yes, I want to? Is it just that society saying like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do? Is it something in their own childhoods? Lola's mom was not around. Lola's dad is an incredible human being.
Hmm.
Ian's mom all of a sudden starts to become really, really nice to them when they have a kid, but she's been a terrible mom for him.
Hmm.
I guess just kind of like maybe some of the psychology that makes them say, "Yeah, we're gonna do this," even though they're both kind of like, "No, we don't want to," and we're still cool and we're still like hipsters and we like bands and we like our own life.
Yeah. It's definitely societal pressure, and it's also just like, there I it's that heartache of being excluded by the people that you were so close to,
Mm-hmm.
which happened to me.
Sure.
My wife's friends, they've had children and they're still very inclusive with her, with us in
Mm-hmm.
general. Um, but my friends, not all of them,
Mm-hmm.
my closest friends are certainly not like this, but my sort of extended friends, they are very
Yeah.
exclusionary. Family parties are just they're their families, and then it's also their friends who also have children.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, that's kind of unfair because I've known you people since kindergarten. And like, I like kids. I enjoy your kids running around and being funny and silly and cute. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
hysterical to me. But like, I don't get to go to the party. I don't get to bring your kid a present because I don't have one. Like, that
Mm.
seems silly. And it kind of all comes from, and like, I know that that's kind of a petty thing to say. I get it. Like, lives change, whatever. But like, I don't know, man. Like, don't exclude your closest friends because they don't have a kid, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, and it does come from that place. It comes from that, like, I felt very slighted
Mm-hmm.
by that. And it like, and it was like kind of a long time not like, yeah, it kind of was like a long time coming kind of thing, because it was like, first it was everybody coupling off, and then it was couples nights only.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, I know all the best wines, all the good steakhouses. Do you guys want to have a good time, or do you want to go to TGI Fridays? Like, what's the deal? And then all of a sudden, like, that was what they were doing. And then it was kids, like, right after. So it went from couples nights
Yeah.
to kids nights. And then, like, the funniest thing was one of my best friends, who he and I were single at the same time. So like, we would always hang out when they were all hanging out and doing their
Mm-hmm.
couples nights things. And we would both bitch about the whole like, oh,
Yeah.
well, we're not good enough, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as he met somebody,
Ooh.
that was the end of that. That was the couples nights were all he did. And I was like, all right, man, have fun watching Game of Thrones for the third time with the
Right.
wife, like, and it's fine, like, whatever, do what you got to
Yeah.
do. I
Yeah.
I think, and this again goes back to the catharsis thing, right? Like, having written this book, all of that's out of me. Now, even though I'm still talking about it with passion and venting about it, I just don't care anymore.
Sure.
Like, I know that that's weird, like,
Yeah.
but because I know if the friends were to call and be like, "Hey, we're doing this," I'd be like, "Cool, let's do it."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like no
Yeah.
hard feelings kind of thing.
There
It's
you
like,
go.
well, I exploited how much of a schmuck you've been now that you're a parent, so I have a book about it.
You ever see that? You ever see that Seinfeld where I want to say he brings back a sweater and they say for what reason? He says spite.
For spite. Yeah. The spite sweater. Yeah.
Lola, she's pregnant. She says something about like she wants more her than him, more of her side than his. But wanting someone to share her pain. There's the idea of like, how much of this baby is mine and how
Hmm.
much is his. We talked already about the mortality rates
Yeah.
for women of color. Um, she has a horrible, horrible, horrible pregnancy,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? She's seeing this becomes a motif, a symbol for sure, or a physical thing. The monster with the purple eyes, with the orbs,
Mhm.
with the red, right?
Yeah.
um this idea of like, is it, yes, my hormones are changing, but am I seeing this? Is this a figment of my imagination? Is this me being tired?
Yeah.
Ian starts to see the same thing at times, similar, right? They have a jarring restaurant encounter with Chloe and Josh and their kid, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of
That's
like,
the
oh my,
first section. That's the first section I ever read in public. Was
yeah,
that
that's a great
scene?
scene. That's a great scene. But just kind of like, oh my God, what have we done? Like, the wow, we're pregnant. This baby's coming.
Yep.
Her actual birthing, the birthing of Jonesy,
Hmm.
is violent. Does not even begin to describe it. I mean, it's just an absolute. How would you describe the her experience in actually giving birth?
Um.
Excruciating is not even enough.
Yeah. So that is sort of like a slight. It's an amped up version of what happened to a friend of mine's
Mm,
partner. The episiotomy, the
yeah.
losing control of one's bowels thing. Like,
Yes.
I talked to both of them, and she was like, yeah, you can fictionalize whatever happened. Nobody's
Mm,
gonna know it's me.
mm.
And I'll tell you right now what her name is. No, I'm just kidding. But it's like, that was all pretty realistic, and again, to me, like, that's the most terrifying thing,
Mm,
is like what a woman goes through with
hmm.
that is just, it's mind boggling. But it's I wanted to do something where I wanted to get a little cosmic too, because like I
Mm,
do have this weird thought of like, or this weird like approach to like childbirth or like creation of life, right? That
mm,
like you're pulling something from the ether
sure.
through, like, and in this case, Jonesy is this entirely new entity. It's literally the creation of life kind of thing. And I sort of wanted to play with the idea of like the first mother
Mm,
giving birth to the first child
mm,
kind of thing. And,
yeah.
I Lola is like the anchor to me. Like she is the strength and like the rock
Hmm.
and what she creates, and what comes of her and Ian's creation or whatever is something all new.
Yeah.
It's, it's, I don't look at Jonesy as like particularly bad or evil. Like I think of him as just new. He's just
Mm,
something different.
hmm.
And that's what's scary because it's like, well, he is a child, but also like, what else is he?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like I didn't want to just do, oh well, he's the devil,
Right. 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 Right.
because that would just feel so boring to me.
Mm,
But it's like, I'd be lying, of course, if I didn't say like Rosemary's Baby was a big influence to me. Like Ira Levin in general
mm,
is a huge influence on me. So is William Peter Blatty. A lot
okay.
of the guys from the 70s are a big influence on me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
like I just didn't want to have that scene. I wanted everything to build up to it, and I
Yeah.
wanted it to
Yeah.
be kind of explosive and ugly and brutal. And
Right.
I'd gotten a lot of good feedback on writing some like gross body stuff
Hmm.
in my second collection. So I was like, okay, well, if I got some good feedback on that, now's the time to get buck wild
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. And you did.
So
And you
good.
did.
I can get spicy, but I can also get gross.
To quote Frankie Pentangeli from Godfather 2, and it worked. You know, talking about the Roman Empire or something like that. No, the new family, and it worked, man. It worked. It was excruciating to read, but in the best possible way.
Awesome.
And like you talk about, with so much chaos, but then Jonesy comes out, he's chill. He doesn't cry, he sleeps through the night. He is mellow, yet, there's this, I mean, you could chalk it up to strictly postpartum depression,
Hmm.
but there are things that are more
Slightly off.
occulty, slightly off, right,
Yeah.
if you will, right? But she has a suicidal ideation. She at times, says, I effing hate him.
Hmm.
Again, he's just there and he's always chill, and before he can talk, it's all good, right?
Yeah.
Um, the creature keeps showing up. We talked a little bit about the mother.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, tell me her first name again.
Dana.
Right. So she's from England. She's from the UK, and she was a terrible mother growing up. You can tell that Ian doesn't feel loved at all. She was always, nagging on him, and to say the least. But she gives him this seven-sided medal, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
What how much of the occult is that? How much of the literal is that piece? Like, I mean, is there a piece that's out there that exists that you base it on, or is that just kind of something to, I don't know.
There's a couple different multi-pointed stars. There's a couple different seven ones that have 7 points or whatever. But there was an occult ritual that I had looked at that required a 5-pointed star. Um and it was very different than like any other 5-pointed star that I'd ever seen. And it just very dramatically different, very, very interesting looking. And I was like, okay, that's a creepy ritual. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do a 7-pointed star. And then when I started doing research into it, I did find, like I said, a few, but like I didn't find any specific connotations for what they meant.
Yeah.
In the book, I give it a specific connotation as to what
Mhm.
it means, but it doesn't have, and that particular cult or the culty vibe that goes through with the 7-pointed star has like, and this is, I guess, is the true crime in me coming out. There is some element of truth to a cult that used
Hmm.
similar imagery that did exist in the UK.
Okay.
And this is sort of like an homage to that in some ways.
Hmm. That makes sense. I appreciate that. Again, I mean, well, not again, for the first time, really want to walk, walking on eggshells around here because the plot is so cool, so interesting, so many turns. It's clear that you're just like a master with plot. And
Thanks, man.
setting things up and foreshadowing, not in an obvious way, right? So there's these continued visions that are had by both. It's this idea of like this not quite a human figure. It's like skin, or no skin, right? Or all muscle,
Yeah.
and darkness, darkness, darkness. Darkness comes up as a big part, I think, of the allegory. I mean, it's a literal darkness at times, a literal darkness,
Hmm.
and there's also just the darkness of being alone, the darkness of lack of love or not. I mean, obviously, with all that happens, it's tough for Lola and Ian to have the same love and relation. Well, I think the love is still there in many ways, but to have the same closeness, right? I mean, they get in
Yeah.
some big time fights and say some things that are pretty they would not have said before the kid, right? So
Yeah.
I want to for those who are listening and are thinking about having kids, it's not that bad. It's great in many ways.
Yeah.
I hope childbirth, I can't speak to it, but it's not, that bad. But yeah, just the idea of like being a different person before and after, rings very true, right? Um,
Yeah.
right. And there's that great scene like where they go to the block party. They get to know this woman through I think the pot dispensary, right? Kit,
Yeah. Yep.
right? And they go to this
Yeah.
block
Kit.
party. They go to this block party, and it's kind of like, man, this is like what it used to be like. And just getting so excited for a night out.
Yep.
My God, there's bands and we're gonna dance. We haven't slow danced in a while and all
Yeah,
that.
there's food trucks. It's all cool. They're seeing
Right.
some of their friends from the back in the day that are
Right.
also on like a date night kind of vibe. It's like
Yes.
it's pretty great. It's pretty perfect. It's like my dream night is to do something like that.
Seriously. And so, just as Jonesy gets older, he starts to talk and he's like I don't know, like a Benjamin Button type of dude. He's like, five going on 83.
Hmm.
And just like you said, like somebody new, just the way he talks different. He has different cadence. He has different, I can't see him being like friends with like the kid down the street and then playing like Legos. You know what I mean?
No.
He's his own entity. So I'm like trying to figure out where to kind of stop talking about plot. I want to, I guess, maybe end with asking like, the pregnancy,
Hmm.
the actual birth. Is there something to be said for like really making things hyperbolic in order to kind of, not that you're jamming points down our throat, but like is that a big tenant for you? Is this idea that if we can make it extreme, we can get to maternal maternal racism,
Hmm.
and we can get to ideas of bad parenting, or whatever some of these themes are. I guess I wonder how hyperbole plays in.
I wanted, yeah, it does play in because I didn't want it to be like so, over the top that it was like, oh
Right.
my God, like this is crazy. But like I wanted to play with things that I had heard from friends of mine and families and stuff that I knew that did have difficult pregnancies and did
Hmm.
have, difficult kids like growing up or whatever. Like, I had one friend whose first kid was a dream and like never cried in the night. Perfectly, whatever. And then the second kid, total nightmare, complete opposite, like
Yep.
difficulty as a little kid and like says weird stuff and does weird stuff